Right, it's ODI number 2. Time flies fast, and here we are, cricket.com, to preview the second one international with JP Duminy once again. JP, thank you for your time. How are you?
Avanesh, always good. How are you, sir?
All well. South Africa 1-0 up. Now it's going to be a testing time for this Indian team, whether they can turn the tables and do what South Africa did in the Test series, win from behind and win 2-1. My first question to you is, any changes going into this one? Because it's still early days to make any sort of moving or shakers from an Indian perspective as well.
Yeah, so it's going to be an interesting one. You're touring with such a big squad, and I think the sort of vision that you have for an ODI series is going to be, whether there are going to be any changes. So is it a case of trying to look ahead at a World Cup in next year, or are we trying to put a lot of emphasis on right here, right now? And I think that's going to determine it. So I certainly wouldn't want to make too many changes. I think the only consideration would be potentially workloads on one or two players, or whether they want to manage that well enough, and what is important going forward for the year. Those are the considerations, but I would like to see some consistency, particularly in a series like this one, to give themselves a good chance.
You mentioned workloads over there. Brings me to my first question in terms of an individual perspective on Jasprit Bumrah. The last time, the first one international, 2 for 48 in his 10, he got a wicket in the power play where people were going on Twitter and be like, oh, finally, that's happened after years. Now, how do you see India managing his workload? Obviously, he's a three-format player. And even in the build-up to this 2023 ODI World Cup, don't get me wrong, this ODI Super League matters for other teams more than it does matter for India because they're hosting the World Cup then. So will India kind of take it easy on him and then just choose the big games to play him in?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier, it's recognizing what's important for the year. What series are coming across all formats for the year, and sort of targeting where he would play the biggest role. And Test cricket is always going to be something that I think he's going to want to or need to play a part of. So that will be a given. And I think T20s potentially might have been put to bed for a little bit in terms of maybe his involvement. One or two games in a series where they can rest him, I think, might be possible. So those are the kind of conversations I think they will have with him. But also, I think it relies a little bit on the player as well in how they feel. So it's not just a directive. I think it's a inclusive conversation about the mental state. One has to consider bubbles as well. The body, how's it reacting to the various series. These are questions and needing to find answers. But it's certainly across the board for most teams, particularly your big name players. We've seen India rest Kohli on a few occasions as well, managing his workload in terms of the leadership role as well. So importantly, he's going to be a big player going forward, and India will certainly need him fresh for the big tours coming up over the next year.
Yeah, you look at how South Africa are managing Kagiso Rabada, for example, and they're doing that beautifully. So hope India can take a page out of that. Let's speak about South Africa right now because the last time in the first one international, Bagua mentioned at the toss saying it's our standard team. Do you think this South African team right now are more settled on paper than the Indians because it has makings of a great ODI team to come in the future?
I think when it comes to that settled nature, I think I certainly look at it as more from a batting perspective, particularly the top six. I think they're still toying around who's going to be the sort of frontline all rounder. We have seen from time to time Petal Kwayo being left out. Pretorius coming in as well. Vian Miller was in the mix, who's not in the mix at the moment. So I think that's the question that will be sort of looming around for South Africa,
And
and
there's
again
Wayne
in
Parnell.
say again.
Sorry, and there's Wayne Parnell as well.
Yeah, so there's Wayne Parnell as well that was just been introduced now, and again I think from that perspective they're thinking about the variations, right, and the variety that they can bring. Now again, leading into a World Cup, I guess you got to plan for the year, and trying to work out, okay, who's probably going to be your five guys that are definitely going to be part of that playing 11. I think there are definitely about three or four in the batting department. Kagiso Rabada comes into the mix. Shamsi comes into the mix, will probably be a definite. So The other positions will be something where they'll consider, right, we need to see more options. We need to give some game time to certain players. But that's where I see the sort of variation coming in, and not sure where who fits where. But certainly that top six is where we're going to see some consistency going forward now. That all-rounder position, and particularly your third and fourth bowler, will certainly be certain question marks.
Yeah, I was going to ask you the Achilles heel of South Africa, but you kind of hit the head in the nail in terms of both ends, the positives and the negatives. Right. We're hearing that it might be the same surface in Pal and Bowling Ground right now for the second ODI, I should say. So will it be the same modus operandi, win the toss, bat, and then kind of apply the spinner with your pressure?
Yeah, I certainly think so. I think when you're walking into a second ODI and a bit of wear and tear on the surface, and we look at the weather, the overhead conditions in Cape Town and Paarl of the last few days, also going into the weekend, it is extreme heat. So we're obviously going to see some drier conditions. So that's going to test, both teams in terms of their mindsets, the way they go about facing spinners. I think from a seamers perspective as well, there'll be a recognition of variation being a key component. So yes, those are the things that they will consider, particularly going into preparation tomorrow, getting their heads around the various deliveries that they want to bowl. So it's going to be an exciting second ODI, and I think probably more the second ODI compared to the first one, where the toss will play a crucial role.
Yeah, and India really need this win to, of course, stay in the series, because it's a small series, a 3-match affair. Finally, before we conclude this preview, here's a one from the fans, basically. Now, they've asked this to us on multiple platforms to ask you this. They are basically saying, let's assume Rohit Sharma and Ravindra Jadeja are fit right now, and the World Cup hypothetically is next week. Who would you replace for those two to come back into this current ODI scheme of things? Be brutally honest.
So without a doubt, Rohit's gonna come back. So I would assume that KL Rahul would then sort of assume that middle order position again. So unfortunately, Shreyas Iyer will probably be the one to miss out there. When it comes to Jadeja, as much as I am a Ashwin fan, I think that is probably going to be the replacement. And the reason I say that, Chahal, he brings that mystery with being a leg spinner and a wrist spinner. So, you always want that kind of variation in your side, and not taking away the fact that even though Ashwin is a traditional off spinner and a finger spinner, he's upskilled his game in a way that, we certainly, when you play against him, you're always watching out for some sort of mystery delivery that he's come up with. But I think that's probably going to be my two changes if you're going to bring those two.
Okay, let's see how it really plays out in the grander scheme of things. Remember, India also showed us in the first ODI that they can manage the left and right combinations pretty well with Dhawan and Rahul, and then they pushed Pant at 4, and then they had Venkatesh Iyer at 6. So let's see how it unfolds at Pal. Catch you all on cricket.com. Thanks so much for watching, and it's a goodbye from us, and there's plenty more content with JP along the way.